Good morning, everyone. So today we've got this line drawing of Deadpool, which we did before with a Sharpie marker. And today I'm going to shade it using a pencil. This particular pencil has a HB lead. So we'll just go ahead and start by using these kind of scribbly lines. I'm not going to do cross hatching here. I'm going to try using just these squiggly line kind of things. I'm gonna keep this part right here a little bit lighter, the blade, because that's supposed to be kind of chromish. And I'll go ahead and do this handle. And I'm just basically just using free lines. And I'm going to make these handles a little darker. So I'm gonna go back and go over it one more time. Maybe a little bit more pressure to get it a little bit darker. And I'm gonna constantly change the angle of my pencil just so I can get more of a thinner line by getting a new part of the lead onto the paper. So now I'm going to make this more rounded by shading this side of this handle. And again, just go over it. The more lines you put on the paper, the darker it's going to be. And I'll do the same here. I'm going to make this side darker. So I'll just go over that. Just on this half, the left half of this handle here. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw a thin line right here in the middle of the blade, as if it has an edge here. Not an edge, but a change in the surface. So I'm going to shade this side of the blade just a little bit. Same with here. Okay, now these stripes, I think I'll go ahead and make those darker. So I'll just go ahead and darken those a little bit more than the surrounding part of the handle. And here I'll have to just use straight lines. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start shading the body. Now I'm going to keep the left side, the upper left side of his surfaces plain white to show that there's a little bit of a highlight. So you can just imagine the shadow line being like this for the head. So inside of this line, then I'll go ahead and start shading it in. And I'm just gonna go row by row, going down the face. Just a lot of circles. A lot of scribbly lines. At this point I'm just trying to keep it more or less even. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and keep this just like this, but now you have to look at what the surface is doing. So this part's going to be sort of flat, the forehead, but then his nose is going to come out here. So there'll be a bit of a shadow here at the tip of his nose where his mask would start receding down to his chin. So you could just imagine maybe, say, this area here will be darker. So I'm going to go over that again, that area. Again, using the same type of squiggly lines. And there gets to be a limit to how dark this particular lead will become on this paper. And again, I'll make it a little bit darker right here, just by adding another layer. And I'll go ahead and make this area darker as well. Okay, I'm going to switch over to my 6B lead here. and make this area even darker. Initially just some light pressure, just so the gradient's fairly smooth. And then as I go out here, this part here will be the darkest and by the chin, so I'll add more pressure, like right here especially, because this is going to be pretty dark. Again, I'm still using these squiggly type lines. So let's go on to the chest here and do the same thing. I'm going to go back to my HB lead. I'm going to keep this upper left part of his chest a little bit lighter, just like here, to show that it's catching a lot of light. But here's where his clavicle is, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little shade there first, but then I'll keep all of this upper part lighter, and I'll go ahead and draw my shadow line from here to the center, and this part of his chest then recedes a little bit, so it's a little bit curved. So this part of his pectoralis muscle will then catch light here in the upper left. So again, here's my shadow line where I will base my shading on, and I'll do the same thing to a lesser extent on these abdominal muscles. So here's my shadow line here to the center, again shadow line here. So normally I won't be drawing these in, but I just wanted to show what I'm thinking as far as where to shade. So I'll go ahead and start shading that area, just like up there. And then I'll go back and make this lower right, and I'll draw a little shadow line right here to show you. I'll make this area darker. Okay, maybe blend it in a bit over here, and I'll do the same for each of these muscle groups. Again, I'll switch to my softer lead just to make the shadow areas fairly dark. Here I'm using smaller circles just because the area is a little smaller. I want to smooth this area out a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and outside of my shadow line, but just add a little bit more shading, but very lightly. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the arms. Again, I'm going to keep this left side light, and I'll basically do the same thing all the way through. So this area of the arm, the left part, will be light, just like the left side of this thumb. And this finger sticking out kind of farther, he's pointing at you, it's going to catch more light than say these. These are going to be further in the back, and I'm going to make these a little bit darker. But this whole left outside of his hand will be catching light, and I'll keep that light. This other hand, the fingers here are going to catch light, but the back of his hand here is going to be dark, so it'll be the opposite of his right hand. Here, this left side will be light. Again, his hand here, the left side, which is his fingers this time, will be light, but the back of his hand here will be dark. And I'll do the same thing down here. The lighter area will be the left side of both of his legs. This will be dark here on the right side, and here. For this foot, the whole top of his foot will be catching light. So here's my shadow line. Something like this. So all of this will be dark, and I'll go ahead and start filling that in. Okay, a second layer. And my soft lead. Make the lower part of his foot dark and this whole right side darker. And this gives the drawing more form, gives the foot form, so it looks like the top part's flat and then it dips down here into shadow and gives it more of a shape, three-dimensional shape. So I'll make this part darker. Okay, so I'll go ahead and shade the rest of the drawing. What I'll do here is I'll start dark right here, this time with more pressure. Just to show you a different way of doing this, I'll make this really dark and then I'll proceed to the light area, lightening the pressure on the pencil. And here. Now this part here of his forearm is going to be catching a lot of light along with this part. And this part right here would start to be a little bit darker. So I'll just add a little shadow right here, a little shading. Right side of his thumb. Okay, the bottom part of his hand here. And all of these fingers are going to be more or less in shadow, although as I go up here I'll keep it kind of lighter and add a bit of a cast shadow from that finger that's sticking out pointing at you. Okay, I'm going to add more pressure right here to make it darker, and it's just so this isn't perfectly white, I'll add a little bit of shading here on the lower right. Okay, let's do the same thing here. Just a little bit of shadow on the lower part of his fingers. And then it comes out here, and this whole area will be darker. And this side of his thumb. Okay, and again, let's go ahead and do this arm. This whole area of his forearm will be in shadow, so I'll go ahead and make this kind of dark. And a little the right side of his upper arm. Okay, I'm going to go back and with my softer lead now and make the darker areas darker. Especially this arm here, his left arm. Because this arm is farther from the light than this arm. So I'll go ahead and just make this fairly dark. Especially by the far right edge. Okay, and let's go ahead and go down to the leg. So this area, I'm just gonna go ahead and make it all dark and add a little bit of shadow to make it more three-dimensional, because this whole area is kind of under other things such as both hands, and won't really be catching much light, so I'm not gonna leave any white areas. And onto my softer lead. Going to make this whole area under his crotch a little bit darker. Same here. Notice I'm also darkening the left side here, and then getting darker right here, the area under his hand, and maybe the right side of his crotch here. Add a little bit of shadow underneath the belt. And now I'm going to go ahead and go onto the leg to make the dark, really dark areas darker. So part of the shading, part of the idea of this kind of shading is to show the pencil lines where the lines are squiggly. I'm definitely not trying to really smooth things out. What I am trying to do is sort of try to smooth out the gradient to show where the dark areas meet the lighter areas in such a manner that it makes it look three-dimensional. Okay, now that I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and add a shadow to his feet here. I'm going to make it to the right to show that he's standing on a surface. And I'll go ahead and also use the squiggly line type thing, shadowing. And I'll just go thicker initially by his foot and gradually thinning it out to the side and lightening the pressure. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you got something out of this particular video. Just another different shading technique to show you that you can use any number of ways to finish your line drawing or color it with colored pencils, magic markers, or in my case, in the prior video, I digitized it and used Procreate to color it in. Thanks for watching and have a great day.